Okay, taking roll call. Chairman Cruz.
Present.
Vice Chair Cooley April. Present. Seth Flodorn.
Here.
Jeremy English.
Here.
Nyla Golden. Igman Ibrahim. Nick Khalik. He said he's gonna be excused absence. Ray McCoy.
Present.
Nick Muhammad.
Here.
Jamila Pickett. Can you excuse absence? Okay, Jamila. Okay, Carla Robinson. She said she's gonna make it.
Good.
Okay. Where's excuse absence?
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. Commissioner English, could you read the labor acknowledgement?
It's on the back of the agenda
Yeah, it's on the back of the agenda.
of this.
What?
It's this one. It's on the back side of that.
We acknowledge that much of America, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the forced free labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, Jim Crow segregation, and acts of racism, all accumulating in the modern day disparities. We pay homage to these ancestors and ask that they guide the efforts of the Reparations Commission to correct these wrongs for those who are living and those who have yet to be born.
Thank you, Commissioner English. The next item of business is the overview of the city budget process. At our last meeting, we passed a motion to recommend to the city council a general budget request of $500,000. To help facilitate the execution of our work plan, at our request, Jay Williams, City Council Chief Budget Officer, was available to attend tonight's meeting and explain to us all the council's process. This should further inform additional steps we'll need to take to detail our budget request and get it before the council as an action item. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Can you please tell us a bit about your role as a council before you get into the inner workings of the budget process?
Absolutely. Chair Cruz and commissioners, thanks for having me here tonight. As mentioned, my name is Jay Williams. I'm the City Council Chief Budget Officer. And so my daughter refers to me as a counter. And I think that she thinks that's what I do. But my role really in the process is as a nonpartisan fiscal officer, budget officer. And so what I do is I help all the council members in a nonpartisan way. So I don't take sides on issues of the day, but try to assist them all equally and help them, develop their budget proposal, help them, refine their budget priorities and get their, budget requests included in the ultimate budget that's adopted. And so that's kind of my role, is to, listen, help facilitate conversations, and then help, them evaluate proposals and help them, provide some of the technical aspects to their priorities. They're really the leading edge, and I just support them. We can go into the overview now on slide 2. So here's the outline for what I hope to talk about. First, we'll go over just a few brief terms. So we'll just discuss a couple of important terminology. Then we'll go into roles and responsibilities during the budget process. So I'll outline the mayor's role, the city council's role, and then the commission's role. And then last but not least, we'll try to tie that all together into budget process and timeline. And I think it's important to know some of the key terminology and concepts and then the roles to really then, look at the calendar and then I think it's easier to look at that. So we can go to the next slide. And the operating budget, programmatic related expenditures are larger of the two. And so is for recurring expenses, utility charges, things like that. Shorter term focus, meaning that we have a fiscal year of 1 year. And so the books close out after 1 year on a lot of the operating budget projects. And the operating budget really funds the routine operations. In addition, there are general financing sources. So any state aids that come in, or federal aid that comes in, that's not really restricted in any way. This could also be property tax levy. So anything related to that is typically how we think of the operating budget. The capital budget, on the other hand, is really how we fund buildings and infrastructure. So that's where we look at, major projects such as bridges or buildings or anything that has long useful life and is very expensive. So in the capital budget, that's typically where we, bond or issue debt to support it. So I think for the purposes of your commission, you're probably going to recommend most of your, make most of your budget recommendations within the operating budget. However, don't forget about the capital budget as something that's also part of the budgeting process, because you could also potentially make recommendations in that budget. And then the right side of the page really shows the multiple budgets that the city deals with. So, we think of the city budget as kind of the core budget functions: parks and recreation, police and fire, public works, et cetera. But we also have what are called component units. And those are, in some cases, legally distinct entities that the city council and the mayor also have a hand in budgeting for and setting the budget. And those are the library, Housing and Redevelopment Authority, St. Paul Regional Water Services, the Port Authority, and the River Center Convention and Visitors Bureau. So really, I guess, tie it all together, I think what the core focus, at least in this conversation, is probably going to be on the operating budget and on the city side. So we can go to the next slide. So one key concept in public finance for the city and also for the state and the federal government is the concept of executive budgeting. And so basically that means where the executive branch assembles and prepares a budget and then recommends it to the legislative branch, which ultimately sets the budget. So just like the federal government, has the power of the purse, but the president actually recommends the budget, and then, House and Senate pass it and it's signed into law. Works very similar at the city. So really, the city council is responsible for setting the ultimate budget, but the mayor manages the departments and recommends it. So he leads and coordinates that process. And then once he recommends it, then the city council phase of the budget process begins. So this is the separation of powers. So we can go to the next slide. So just, building on that concept, the city charter outlines the mayor's role in this process. And this is: the mayor shall prepare and recommend to the council budgets as provided in section 10.03. So when I refer to the city charter, I like to call that the city constitution. It's really difficult to change, and it really outlines some of the big picture mechanics of how the city works. So this is a core responsibility of the mayor, is to recommend the budget, but he also has several other responsibilities related to implementing it. And then as we go through the year, if there's revenues above what we expected or revenues below, he'll recommend budget amendments, and then the council will vote on them. public hearing on the budgets provided in section 10.03 at a time and place announced in advance. The council may revise the budgets recommended by the mayor, and the council shall, by a resolution and ordinance if applicable, adopt the budgets and certify tax levies. Adoption of the budgets shall constitute appropriations of the amount specified therein as expenditures from the funds indicated. So ultimately, the city council acts on the budget. They need 4 votes to pass the budget resolution. The mayor can veto that budget resolution, but if the city council has 5 votes, then they can override that veto. So that's the mayor role, city council role, and then we'll go into the administrative code, which outlines, the core basis of the Community Reparations Commission. And so I've copied the city administrative code in there, and the bolding is mine, just to call that out. So the Community Reparations Commissions in the part of the administrative code, which outlines its powers and duties, really serves in an advisory capacity to both the mayor and the city council on all policy and budget matters pertaining to reparations within the city through the following activities. So you're empowered to make short, medium, and long-term policy program. That kind of spans the gamut of duration of what these. They're, the way that I, understand this is that recommendations, but then there will be ongoing review on city programming and budgeting. This kind of outlines the role in a device. And then we can go into the next, which I think is probably.
I can't hear. Whatever this is too.
Someone's calling.
So again, looking at it from a yearly basis, but at the start of the year, we're identifying our priorities. Engagement occurs, the mayor collects feedback from the community, and the city council participates to that in some degree. As I mentioned, August is when the proposal occurs. And then through September, October, and November, the city council budget committee will meet at City Hall in Chambers every Wednesday, just about every Wednesday at 10 a.m. to review all the departmental budgets. So we'll look at every single budget for each department throughout the city. We'll also review the library's budget, the Port Authority, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, all of them. And then City Council will make revisions around November. So if certain things aren't in there, or certain things we want to fund less, or we want to fund more, those items are revised into a resolution that the city council adopts in early December. And so, we adopt the budget resolution, set the property tax levies, and then that budget, or that vote sets up the budget for the following year. So this year, 2024 in the fall, what we'll be looking at is the budget for fiscal year 2025. So that's kind of the, overarching look at the budget. Does anybody have any questions? Yep.
This might be kind of geeky.
Sure, yeah.
I'm imagining ginormous Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Am I close?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a lot of Excel spreadsheets. I prefer legal size, but yeah, they can be pretty thick. So, but the budget's posted online. So when, Mayor Carter recommends his budget, I encourage you all to go look at it. There will be a detailed summary of all the things he's proposing in there. So, yeah, Excel is definitely the tool of the trade. Yep.
I have a question about, so this is for the mayor, correct? But does city council have their own budget then?
Yeah, city council, every department within the city government has its own budget. So the city council has a budget. So I work closely with Ms. Burt and, she's part of our central staff team. I'm also part of that central staff team. So her work is funded out of the city council budget as well as my work is funded out of the city council budget. But the Reparations Commission can make recommendations on any part of the budget, on any part of the city budget.
So can you clarify, Jay? So you're saying that the mayor, will present his budget and that would have to go before the city council, and that's all happening around August. So is this budget for 2025?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we are looking at, our activities for 2024, which, we have some 2024 related activities in there. And 2025, when do we need to have our request kind of into the operations of everything?
So I would always say that the sooner the better. However, your request could come in after the mayor's proposal. Typically, by charter, the mayor recommends the budget, but the city council can modify the budget. So if your proposal occurs after the mayor's recommendations, that doesn't mean that the city council won't consider it or it won't be, considered. But, the sooner the better, I think, given that, it's a really quick time frame. It goes real fast, September through November.
Anything that we recommend though, again, whether it's before August or during or after that, would be for any particular line item for fiscal year 25, correct?
That's right.
But has there been dollars that have been set aside for the activity of this commission due to the fact that it was, I don't want to say ratified, but passed, 22. And so there was probably line items for our operations, minimal operations, as far as our, stipends or compensations or whatever.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Yeah, so the commission, how it's budgeted, so there's, a staff time capacity aspect, and that would be, out of the city council's budget, but then there's also appropriations for stipends and things like that. So, those sort of operations are funded. But in terms of the actual budget, that would be, Veronica's position and then the work that's being done at city council.
Thank you.
And maybe just to add to that, because I did kind of get a little bit more clarification from Jay earlier today, is that essentially, I guess as we're doing our work plan, the operations budget aspect of it is kind of taken care of. And so what we're looking at, I guess for lack of a better phrase, is more kind of programmatic or initiative, types of support. So that's what our work plan would be wrapped around.
You said something about federal funding. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so, the city of St. Paul receives a number of different federal grants. We call them intergovernmental transfers, and it's, basically federal grants, federal appropriations. It could be state grants or, other state appropriations. I'm not an expert in the area of what funding is available, but that might be an avenue to seek funding.
You call it intergovernmental transfers?
Yep.
I have maybe one kind of question. So again, as we're looking at our work plan, should we assume that this can be a multi-year ask? Or is this kind of a one-shot deal?
I think based on my interpretation of the administrative code, I mean, we budget in 1 year. However, I think the charge, or at least the way I read that language, is that you can look at short, medium, long-term recommendations in this area. Again, that makes your job a little harder, versus a 1 year recommendation, but I think the way I read the administrative code is that you can, give expansive recommendations.
So, aside from the legislative aid position and the stipends, is there money available for this commission this year?
So not in 2024, there wouldn't be money available. If there were, appropriations available, they would occur, through a city department. So, the appropriation would be potentially to the city council or to, another departmental, or another department within the city. So there wouldn't necessarily be spending authority for the commission. However, the commission could recommend that spending take place, and then if it's appropriated to one of the departments, that work but it would be housed within, a department.
Or an external entity outside of that, if it's some problematic things that the city doesn't do.
Exactly, right. So we have a lot of what we call PSAs and professional service agreements, and it's basically a contract with an outside agency or a nonprofit or something that we think is, there's a lot of different cases, but oftentimes it's uniquely positioned to perform that work better than we can.
More questions?
So, well, I guess first of all, with those PSAs, what does the process look like to get on that list? Do you have to be on that list for us to use them as a vendor or as a group or organization?
So the city has a lot of rules around procurement. And so the way it would work is that, city council would pass the budget resolution that might, contain an appropriation to a department to, do an RFP, which is like a request for proposal, or to, do a competitive process to see, which group could potentially take on that work. And then we'd evaluate that, award it based on, whatever criteria are set up. So, as long as we follow the rules of procurement and the expenditure of taxpayer money, then you could work with.
So it's an internal call out of if there's a service that the city is looking for, and then a vendor can apply
Yeah.
versus a vendor just like filling out a form and this is a service that they are offering. It's more of a call out versus an offer.
Yeah,
Okay.
typically, and we have different procurement thresholds for when we have to go through certain steps of a process. So it really depends on the dollar threshold for the contract. But we have a whole procurement division that manages, the fair award of contracts or, taxpayer dollars.
What stipulations exist as relates to, kind of equitable representation in those PSAs?
Yeah, so procurement is not my area of expertise, but I do know that, at a certain threshold, you need, an affirmative action plan. You need other, really like labor standards, other things based on the threshold of it. And then the higher the dollar amount, the more rigorous the process is. So I would say the equitable nature is really, driven by the dollar thresholds, but I think generally,
Yeah,
so.
I was just wondering about the intentionality of making sure that there was diversity in the vendors that were utilized.
Yes.
I understand, sorry, the federal piece, and again, affirmative
Yeah.
action is that, but It's Minnesota, there were only so many. no,
Yeah.
but
So I know, and again, this is not my area of expertise, but I know the procurement department has made, you know, a lot of efforts in this area to really recruit, you know, vendor list that's, you know, more representative of the city, small minority-owned businesses. So it's not my area of expertise, so I can't speak to it very knowledgeably, but I know that that's an area of focus within our procurement division. And I think they even have a certain certification program that they operate.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cruz and commissioners for having me. Appreciated the time and good luck to you on all your work.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the discussion of the work plan activities, our first draft. Veronica, can you review what we've developed thus far?
Okay, everyone can take out let's see if I can turn this off here. Take out your draft work plan here. Put this up so the audience can see it. So as you can see, you know, I've pulled together a lot of the activities that we've already done thus far. And listed, as well as, you know, maybe a few things that we kind of still haven't in the hopper or what's in progress. And then some of the ideas that were laid out at our last meeting. Now, maybe based on Jay's presentation and just some correspondence too, we've been having back and forth with city council members. You know, we still, you know, have to provide like a detailed kind of itemized budget. And that may be something that a committee can kind of sit down and focus some attention on. You know, Jay did present us with a sample that's in your packet, so that's something that can be used. But, you know, if you look at just some of the ideas that we floated around at the last meeting, you know, the budget allocation, you know, having potentially a committee to look at that and, you know, a lot more details around that and build that out based on our initial $500,000 request. You know, that's very high pie in the sky, but, you know, maybe that's something that can be negotiated down based on whatever conversations that happen down the line. The Reparatory Justice Fund, community listening sessions, the harm report, having a presenter come in and talk about potential ordinance around slavery, disclosure, and redress, and some archival work, as well as proposing a legal question to do some research around in terms of looking exclusively at doing reparations around descendants of chattel slavery. So, you know, that's generally what we have. And as we talked and met with city council members, we just told them that as of this point, we only have a general recommendation that we're operating around with that 500,000. But, you know, I guess we have to kind of back into that and align that into a line item budget. So.
Now, just to be clear, we're talking about a budget for 25, not this year.
Correct,
So we don't really have any operating money for 24.
correct. Yeah, or I should say maybe more like programmatic initiative money, you know, it's just operations is the only thing that we're dealing with. Unless you go through the city. So.
Or the city council,
Yeah. You know, so we can
city council can get that money.
Like if we were to have this and stuff. Thanks, Veronica. Seeing this is our last in-depth discussion prior to final adoption by our next meeting, are there any changes to the existing work plan or other activities that anyone would like to suggest for part of our 2024-2025 work?
Can I just make a comment? I wasn't at the last meeting, because I was sick, but and all of this is laid out, but I just wanted to comment that I think that the four pieces that really are important in my mind is that education piece, the data piece, as well as the law and glossary. All of those things are laid out, but I just want to make it clear that these are pieces that I believe are gonna make it really integral and with the education piece and the legal and glossary piece of the work plan, I just feel like these pieces are going to make it so that the community also has buy-in through this process that we have. As well as having current data of the gaps within our city that are affecting the Black folks that we are trying to fight for this for. So I know that this is talked about already, but since I wasn't here last week, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I'll listen to my daughter's phone.
Anybody else?
Comments on the work plan?
Suggestions?
Yeah, if we're working from this draft one, much of what's on the first page is not a work plan. In my mind, the work plan is going to be the specific steps that we take to address the mission of the commission. And these other pieces have just been preparatory stuff that we have to do anyway. But it's not a work plan that, in my mind, we should, include here. So we're kind of at a loss for, thinking about a work plan. We don't have any operating money for this year. So we're really doing a plan for next year, which means we, are kind of hashing out what we're going to do next year. And if that's when this stuff goes into effect, because otherwise we got nothing to work with right now. So part of what I'm looking at is what's really in this draft is an actual work plan that we're going to be taking up in 2025. Because this is not for 2024, even though I think there's some critical things that we need to do this year that we apparently don't have any money to do.
It's my understanding that we do have
We
money.
do have, we'll use that.
We could use city council money. City council could appropriate money out of their budget. We could use, department, it would have to go through a city department. So it wouldn't actually be us as a governing body spending money, but it could go through St. Paul Parks and Rec. It could go through the library, it could go through other city departments.
So then we could make a work plan for 2024.
Absolutely, but the request for money from the city council part has to be included.
But that wasn't clear from what I heard, but
I think he's
He
staying.
said-
Yeah, you said, I'm gonna say, it would just go to a different department.
Practice, yeah.
okay. So is there an interest in, making this work plan 24, 25? Because if we're just looking at.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Okay,
Let's try that.
so if we are spending money this year, are we looking at these activities that are on? And again, I think the first page is kind of what we've done. It's not, we hadn't thought about that as a work plan. It's really when we get down to these specific steps that we're starting to talk about a work. Is that?
Yeah, and maybe we can look at it as, these other activities that, will actually take some real, much more tangible dollars. You can see that into 2025, because at least from what I was hearing Jay say is whatever kind of appropriation we can get from the city council in the mayor's office, an agreed appropriation, those dollars can either go through, city, entities or external entities. If it fits whatever, our work plan activity is. So, I think you're right in terms of the things that we've done this year. Mostly is like out of the, I guess all of it's just been out of the operation budget because it's just been a lot of housekeeping type of activities. But the rest of these activities, going out into the community, doing any kind of reports, those kinds of things may take, consultants, may take, different types of marketing, advertising. And so that we would have to build a more robust budget around.
Agreed, and I can say, like you said, we can look exactly at what, we're talking about, but like, I think I don't want to jump ahead, but when we start talking about subcommittees, I don't know how much that would cost to do that, but we can get into subcommittees and start working on a budget subcommittee. The Rondo or the Emancipation Fund subcommittee. So we can start working in these subcommittees as part of our work plan. And even if you look at what he just laid out, the mayor's gonna drop his budget proposal on August 13th. It won't be approved until January. So we'll be working along with that process as we're moving forward with the work plan.
And I just wanted to add, for the group to think about too, I know we had initiated a discussion around glossary and I forgot to put that on here. So that is something I would like to add. But some of these activities too may be able to be combined. For example, if we're doing like a harm report, whoever's doing that, if we get an outside consultant or something, or an organization, individual, so forth, that maybe that's a component that they can put into their aspect of the work. But, I know that's something that we were initially thinking of. But, I still think we should probably parse that out and put that in a particular line item. Or was it in there? Oh, all right, thank you. And then I was also thinking maybe to a historical timeline of some sort, because I know a lot of times when we're talking in depth about our history, sometimes it gets kind of mushed in together, and it would be good to just have a timeline that's looking at national history, or national timeline, in our, state timeline, local timeline, neighborhood timeline, wherever, so that you can see where, folks fit in that scheme.
I'm good.
Yeah, no, next, and then,
But Shruti, were you done?
I think here, something else I had in my notes. And I know someone donated some materials. I don't know if they're still here in the audience, but it might be good to get a collection of materials that you guys can pull out and read and, kind of review at your own leisure. And maybe help support attending any kind of conferences, that are going on. And something else, but I think that, and I believe, potentially a volunteer in the community wants to make a resource list that we worked on previously with the advisory committee, that they have some suggestions to make that resource list very user-friendly. So that again, it's kind of helping with the education component. So those kinds of things may, take some resources. Maybe we can get community members join in and help stipend them and so forth. So anyway, just kind of those smaller things.
So I just wanted to say, so when I see the word work plan, that's different than budget. So, in the, like I've been a grant manager and what have you. There are grants that are groups that get funding to do planning, right? We're not necessarily getting funding to do planning, but a work plan is not the budget. So we need to be talking about what it is that we want to do, looking at and having in-depth conversations about the individuals who can assist us with that. Again, how we want to exercise that piece, how we want to strategize that. What the timeline is for that, looking at that, will that take us 3 months? Will that take us 6 months? At what point in time will we actually need physical dollars? Looking at, again, the trajectory and the timeline of what that looks like. Based on how I hate to say this, but we know this is true. Everyone's antsy to spend some money, but based on how we've been able to kind of talk about things and what have you, we really haven't been able to. So get our vibe as far as the communication that we have, the ideas that we have, and who is interested in doing what, who has various resources and connections to assist us with that, to be able to research those, to look at that. That's that planning stage. And again, that's woven into the work that we do. But as we are just starting, and it's not that there hasn't been work done before, but really honing in on what it is and focusing in on what we want to do. I feel like this little bit of time that we have is probably just the right amount of time that we have so that we really get focused and that we understand where everybody's coming from, where they want to contribute, what they want to do, and what that budget will kind of look like. We know that it's 500,000 and we're shooting at that. And so looking at, so what does that mean as far as, the dollars for this piece or that piece or what have you. So I'm not, again, I'm sort of disappointed, but if we had $500,000 in 2 months, what would we do with it? We want to put it to use, but then it's like, then it's kind of, we have it, but it's sort of sitting there. And we do, it's not that we don't have funding, but we really want to make sure that we utilize this in a way that's gonna have an impact. And that everybody's comfortable with it.
I think that's part of like number 5's discussion of committee appointments. So we will break down our work based on the draft work plan. So if you'd like to work on the budget, there'll be a committee for budget. Want to work on the timeline, there'll be a committee for that. So the draft of the activity so far, we will go into committees and then go into details about what that work looks like.
Oh, I think we got a comment and then,
I'm gonna pass.
oh, Mr. McCoy.
I was just looking back at our reparations role, our commission's role, and thinking about if our job here is to serve in an advisory capacity on all policy and budget matters pertaining to reparations within the city. We really don't have anything in this draft work plan that kind of addresses how we go about doing those pieces. And this specifically says that we have to develop a time-based evaluations of city expenditures using quality of life metrics. I don't know what that is. But the bottom line is there's some very specific things in the ordinance that this body is supposed to do. And as I look at the pieces of the work plan, I'm trying to measure what's on that work plan against the language in the ordinance. Because if we don't match those two things up, I think we'll be off base.
Mr. Muhammad.
I think quality of life metrics means we're using the disparity data that's available in the city to measure our work for impact. So we're not just jumping out into housing. We want to know how many houses we want to get Black people into ownership. That's quality of life. And that's a metric that we need to use to guide work in housing. I think the first thing we need to do is back up before we start talking about money, get our bearings on the disposition of the city and what's available. Just like we had somebody come in and give us an orientation on the governance body of the city structure, we need to have each department come in and give us a presentation on what they do. Before we get to a budget, we need to take in as much information about the different administrative departments within the city. Then we build our budget based on the plan that we want to use to target each department, which can help us deliver the most potent recommendations to the budget for reallocation of resources. That way, we're not just chasing dollars before we have a plan. We'll have a plan before we ask for dollars. And so we're not chasing our tail. And so to your point, that's not a work plan, but the basis of the work plan is already laid out in what we've already been charged with for the charter in the ordinance for the city. We just have to get our bearings with the city, and we haven't done that yet.
I think that could also be done in the subcommittees because we only have one meeting per month for the rest of the year, which runs into the budget. So we can't have a presentation one from each department every year to the end of the budget.
That's fine.
Right, and also the harm report is what is going, so if we want to, as we're producing the harm report, that's when that interaction would take place with those city departments. And that's what when we would have whoever's doing the harm report, they would understand what those departments do. And then they would see how those departments have harmed Black Americans with ancestors descent from U.S. chattel slavery in cities and such. Mr. English.
Taking a look at this work plan, it does kind of, if you look at the legislative advisory companion report, we are kind of starting to build on what some of the work Nick and Trey and them already kind of set forth for us. We just got to start taking a look at what our talents are and dividing to what these subgroups are going to look like. So if you're looking at, for example, being part of the listening sessions, what are your talents when it comes down to how those hearing sessions are going to entail? What are your talents there when it comes down to the budget? Do you have any experience in accounting or dealing with different budgets in different areas? So we want to get everybody to kind of just break down into these subgroups because, again, that's some of the work that the Legislative Advisory Committee already, set forth and did. So we want to build on that and just start rolling right now. You know what I mean? So I think, like I said, again, budget concerns can go right into that committee. And we should be start to focus on what committee we want to be involved in and where our talents are.
So it sounds like, I'm listening to what everybody's saying here, but it sounds like we shouldn't be talking about this draft work plan. But we should be talking about the establishment of the subcommittees to begin the work, because until the subcommittees do their work, we don't have a work plan. If we're going to break down into those areas, and I'm listening to what Nick just said, there's a great deal of information we need before we can develop the work plan. And so if we say anything about a general work plan at this point, it's the development of subcommittees to start to gather the things we need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh yeah, Mr. Bond.
Just as a point of clarity, how many people are familiar with the different departments in the city and the budgets that they manage?
Every single department of the city.
Right. We're gonna be making.
No, I was just commenting on the challenge in your question, not,
I'm trying to help us.
Got it.
settle
No,
into-
I
I'm
don't-
trying to help us settle into the reality of what we probably should get ready to prepare for before we start talking dollars and cents, because the reality is, I don't even think $500,000 is gonna be appropriate for what we need to do. But if we evaluate each department might be looking for the feedback that we're going to provide. And they might have resources available to help us streamline, and our budget might grow substantially through proxy because we're making recommendations in real time to people who need it, who don't have the expertise that we have to evaluate what they're there for and how they can contribute to equitable and reparative outcomes. That's what I'm saying. So even before we get to work groups, the reason I asked that question is because we're assuming that we can start work groups where everybody's gonna know how to evaluate different areas of the city. And if we don't even know that,
No.
The work group.
that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm
That's the
asking.
process of what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
It's not as a commission because we only meet once a month. We
Right.
can't evaluate all of the departments on our once a month meeting. We need a committee to do that
I
work.
never said we should do it in saying there's all of the information we're looking for is readily
That's what
available
the
every
committee
day.
will do.
Good. And I think that will come out.
So
of the-
are you saying that the committee is going to evaluate all of the departments and then come back to the group?
I would say the hiring report committee would do that.
Okay.
So as of right now, to your question, what we're tasked with is, do we want to make any more recommendations to the already sort of subcommittees that's already been provided on the work plan, in addition to what Veronica asked to add. So we're just adding to the list. Historical timeline, she said, the glossary was already in there, conferences, a resource list, and, yeah, those are the things I got from Veronica.
And there's some departments suggesting that, not
Yeah, I'm cool not to have that on there right now. I think, we probably need to have some conversation about, or some research on what would be involved in trying to, get to the outcome of being a committee under the city council. I mean, under the mayor.
and what the pros and cons.
So we could move on to committees if nobody else has anything to add to the work plan as a possible second.
I just have a question. So the budget we had talked about earlier, though, that's just 2025, correct? So it's not, we can have more money later, is like, okay, just wanted to.
Impossible if we can make a request through different departments this year if we need funding.
Or the city council, if they have a budget.
Our next order of business is discussion of committee appointments, keeping in mind some topics may be able to be combined. I would like to have committees formed to tease out any implementation ideas once we adopt a list of work plan activities. Any thoughts on that, or are these topics you like to be, are there any topics you would like to be assigned?
Yeah, I can start out with that Slavery Disclosure Act. And also, you know, I would like to be a part of that harm report.
Okay, well, maybe I'm a little out of it, but how many committees are there and where are they listed? So that I know. Which, maybe on 4 or 5 of them.
Whatever we want to call it, the Emancipation Fund Committee, or the Territory Justice Committee, the Listening Session Committee, the Slavery Disclosure, Committee. And the harm. It's a harm.
Was that list?
Just right.
And so we know the intent of all of the different committees, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the committees will send me a set.
Yeah.
So budget, harm report, repertory justice, listening session, and preparatory justice, but yeah, slavery disclosure. And then
Sorry, could you repeat it one more time?
Budget,
Thank you.
harm report committee, preparatory justice fund committee, listening session committee, the Slavery Disclosure Act.
That was 5.
Yes.
and then I want to be part of this session. And budget. Yeah.
Are you taking notes on who wants to be part of this committee?
So let's start with the budget. Who all wants to be a part of the budget committee? Raise your hands for I can do right now.
You know, I'll go with that too. That'll be my little three.
Nyla, Cooley, and Jeremy.
on the, budget meeting.
Mm-hmm. That's what I have.
Could you repeat those names too real quick?
Nyla, Kulia, Jeremy, and.
Sure.
Right.
And, the harm report committee. Julia, Joseph, and Jeremy.
Okay, hold on. Okay, who's that again?
Julia, Joseph, and Jeremy. Then the reparatory justice fund committee.
What exactly would that really have to do?
So, well, basically, when Evanston, the first thing Evanston did when they, established their reparations commission, is they set $10 million aside. To create a fund for their reparations program. So we're gonna need to create a fund ourselves, right? And, basically, even if we have a disclosure, slavery disclosure act, part of that ordinance says that if organizations or a company has been connected to slavery, that the city would want that organization to contribute to the fund.
Okay.
Seeing that those both are, because both of those are so connected to each other, I would rather be a part of the Reparatory Justice Fund because I want to support the Slavery Disclosure Acts, you know, instead of being a part of what I would consider just the straight budget committee. Because I want to really be a part of those Slavery Disclosure Acts, and because that Reparatory Justice Fund is kind of like a bridge for that. I would rather resign from the budget and focus on the reparatory justice.
So take you off of the budget consideration to reparatory?
Yeah,
And the Slavery Disclosure Act and then the budget. The
Preparatory.
Reparatory Justice Fund be combined since they're related, right?
Yeah.
So did you get that, Veronica?
Slavery and
Disclosure Act,
reparatory?
yeah, to be combined. And now we're down to 1, 2, 3, 4 commissions. I mean, committees. Sorry, my brain's on.
Listening, so the last one will be the listening,
Yes,
and listening session.
I want to be part of that.
Julia, Ray, Latin.
And Carlos.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, I was trying to raise my hand and ask a question. No. You know, so.
For you.
Oh, I was gonna ask to be put on the Slavery Disclosure Reparatory Justice Fund.
Okay.
That's about.
And and what these could be,
The glossary, that's on the work plan, but,
yeah.
How late?
Now, does that include data stuff or is that another committee? Or is that not
I
something?
thought the glossary was building a vocabulary that relates to the issue. I have a question about that. And just thinking about glossaries and dictionaries and encyclopedias and Wikipedias. Is the glossary just going to be terms, or would the glossary also be able to have in it historical figures? It's just a question, I don't know.
Can I, no, I just, that's kind of how he came in and gave us terminology. I think that would be in it, but also I think what she just said, when somebody came in and they wanted to beef up our resource list, I think all of that can kind of work together. This I do.
And my other question, and Veronica, you probably answered this and went in one ear and out the other, so I apologize, but the glossary would be, among other things, accessible on the website.
Could be, yeah,
Yeah.
more than likely.
That's what I would have.
Yeah, that's, I mean, this can be, I don't want to get too dramatic about this, but I think this could be actually for a lot of people, very eye-opening, not only to have, a term, something that refers to an era or an event or something that came out of it, but also key figures. And of course, the list of figures will always be growing because there's always scholarship and there's always, somebody goes into an attic and opens a box and then there's, everybody's related to everybody all of a sudden. So I just wanted to ask the question to be clear, because I think that for a certain kind of person, a glossary can be a really very useful and very accessible door into the topic. That's about it. That's all I have.
It's for educational, people, a lot of different, when we first started municipalities from around the country, reach out to us, find out how we got this established. And I think that glossary is helpful for not just us. Even today, we were at a meeting earlier and, some kids from university were asking us questions like, what is reparations? What's this? What's that? And so it's good for us, it's good for the community, it's good for students in college.
So then can I propose that we add one more committee, which includes the glossary, the resource list, and
Yeah.
I had a question about that committee that we potentially might be adding. So with the glossary then, is it gonna be strictly terminology and the definition? Or is the glossary going to be a place where shared terminology is added? And what I mean by that is there might be a definition or an opinion of something that as a group, we need to understand what that terminology or what that historical event is versus, this color is red, like that there's fact and then there are things that can be argued, I feel like in a glossary.
Do you think,
Isn't that something that, I'm sorry.
the committee would make that determination. Nothing, we're not saying that anything's gonna be.
Because it just makes a difference of if I would want to be in the committee, that particular committee or not.
one thing, like kind of what Nyla was,
Yeah, it's evolving. That's where I'm kind of,
that's where,
Figure
I think
out-
that's where the magic is, to me, is inside those committees, because it gives us time to talk and get, like you said, get to know each other, see where we're coming from. Things like that.
So again, I'd like to propose that, I don't know if we got that wrong, that fifth committee will be glossary, resource list, and timeline. Okay. Anybody want to be a part of that committee?
So I just want to make sure I understand. So we just started with glossary and expanded it to include these other functions. I'm still on. Okay.
Chelsea.
All right, I'll be a partner.
I think you said something about like figures, which could go with the resource list, which could be developed out of the
Yeah.
timeline by having.
Yeah, and to respond to Jamal, one of the. I'm going on about this, but one of the beauties about having something that's interactive is you can do exactly what you're talking about. Is here's the term, and here are the hyperlinks to the scholarship, to the controversy, to the, it could be really endless. I'm not myself a TikTok person, but somebody might have a TikTok on a particular thing. And you could go there from the glossary can be your doorway. The timeline can be a doorway, same thing.
Like, yeah, even like how they have mapped in St. Paul, you can click on the rate. So, yeah,
I'm not nothing about data, so to me, people and things, those statistics sometimes help to provide context as does a straight definition of a particular word, place.
You still had, let's see, what else is on here? Support archival work and legal question.
That archive work probably will go under that block street and sort of place, right?
yeah. Thank you.
Question, when it's under repertory justice and slavery. Correct. The legal question? Or no?
I think that's the double, will be in the whole thing.
Six committees. I like to start the legal question.
I think, does anybody else want to be a part of the last two committees that were mentioned?
Is this, oh, sorry, is this set in stone, like, we can't like decide later?
No.
Yeah, I'll type this up with, have it all laid out and hopefully at the last meeting, we can just
Yes.
adopt it. In terms of the activities and then the committees can go in and, dig in them as deep as they want to, and then hopefully we can assign a budget, a detailed budget, itemized budget.
Yeah, the budget could have been. Propose that to the rest of the session. Commissioners.
All right, so legal question, who else?
What is this?
But with the employer, I requested to have,
Well, I was raising a question, if you want that, when I was last meeting, I was raising the question as to whether we wanted to think about, legal analysis of, in support of the policies that we might recommend. And primarily because I saw what happened in Nashville when they put forth their policy recommendations and the Nashville city attorney came in and said, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so I was just thinking it might make sense if we were to kind of preemptively think about how we defend policies that are designed to recommend reparations to the city council and the mayor.
would that be a committee you would want to be on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We got cool here.
Put me on there too. I'll be on there with you, Ray. Yeah, me too. Yeah. we can close the meeting.
7 of the 6.
Yeah, and we have to keep in mind that we can't have any more than 6 commissioners.
Oh, I think they're all there.
Okay, all right. And what did you say about archival work?
That goes under the glossary research, I don't have like that, right?
Anything around educational materials, conference attending?
I think that would be listening session.
Yeah, or in budget. But would somebody be in charge of research? How do you go to? Do we have a committee that looks at what conferences are on there? We should get one. No? All right.
I think this is a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. It's a lot.
Hopefully that's a lot of committee. And so and we might end up.
Yeah.
So, any more discussion on that?
Yeah, I'm still lost on which one of these power maps the city,
The harm report.
the harm report committee. So develop a harm report to help establish a narrative and start a point of redress similar to cities such as Boston, Los Angeles State, such as California.
That's what they did. Did you see the harm report?
No, I'm reading the description of what the group is supposed to be.
But the harm report will do that.
So could we extrapolate that out? Cause I'm a little concerned that we're not, like, I'm respectfully trying to express what I know and what I'm bringing to the table. And I don't see it in the plan. And so when I bring it up, I'm not bringing it up to be.
No, we're not, I'm not saying that, but we're saying that the harm report committee can do the work of talking to the different departments to see what their functions are.
Right, and I was just saying, we could have put that in.
Oh, that should be in,
Instead of citing, because you
But-
told me these were the descriptions, so I'm reading for the description.
Right, well, even once we get into the groups, we can start tightening up those descriptions.
I mean, would it be helpful to, so for each of these committees kind of lay out, what the charge is or the parameters of what the committee is to do, or?
I mean, we can do that now, or do we want to wait until we get in the committee?
I think the
Let the
committee should
committee
decide
decide,
what they're
right.
proposing.
My primary concern is that there's a charge that we have to make recommendations, and then I'm looking at what these committees are focusing on. And I'm trying to make the correlation between what the committees are gonna spend time and energy on and what our job is when it comes to making recommendations to all of the budgets that the city is getting ready to roll out. There's utility to some of these things. But when it comes to an actual work plan that produces the outcome that we're charged with, I'm getting concerned at what I see.
Do you have a copy of the harm report, or the example?
No, but I do understand what a work plan is, and I do understand what our ordinance is,
I do too.
and I understand what a committee is. And I know how to break out committees. I'm not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
But what we write and what we commit and communicate to one another, just like you bringing up the glossary, is very important. So I'm just saying, as I look at what we're charged with via the ordinance and what these committees are getting ready to focus on, how much of that is going to contribute to the outcome of the actual recommendations that we're going to be charged with.
And that's why the harm report will take a look at all the city departments historically and now, and help us be able to see how the city has harmed us, what the different departments do, and then that would help us make recommendations.
Can I make a suggestion here? Because I hear what Nick is saying. And I think that in terms of describing the work of this committee, that naming it harm report is kind of jumping the gun. Because a part of what Nick is saying is we need to talk to these various departments, understand how they operate, understand their budgets, take a look at how those budgets are impacting what we're concerned about with its reparations issues. And then we can make policy recommendations from there. And I think if you label the committee harm, it confuses the idea that we're actually talking about sending people from this body into the various departments to get information about.
If we're confused here, there's going to be more confusion.
We're not confused.
I'm confused.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that maybe we need some, at least I think a part of the goal was in reference to what Nick was saying, is to make sure we gain a better understanding of those departments and how they work and
Just
what the budgets are.
to the wording.
Is that-
You're developing a report based on the harm, and by doing that, you would have to go into the different departments, find out how they operate, find out what harm was created in housing, what is the data point in the disparities in housing, what is, all of those things. You have to research first before you come up with a harm report, which is why it's called a harm report. And then you have this knowledge based on the research that you've done with the different departments and how each one of those departments have harmed and, yeah, work operated and have harmed the Black community, and then what recommendations do we have based on that policy, what policy recommendations and budget recommendations based on the harm report that we have, we could recommend to the city.
Which I hear you, and I think what the simplest way I can put it is, there's a historical way to approach this, and then there's an engineering way to approach this. I'm looking for the engineer language as opposed to historical rhetoric, because we're going into departments who are gonna have an engineer hat on. They're there to figure out how to actually take what we're gonna recommend and run. Calling it harm puts it into a historical context. What do you mean by harm? Well, how should we be looking at this?
Well-
And that requires more education on the back end of people who are gonna be engaging, as opposed to an evaluation of the departments, and just simply calling it an evaluation of the departments for our determination. Placing these historical narratives requires more analysis and information and creates confusion. Just because you all have it doesn't mean that the multiple departments who have a lot of different things on their plate already are gonna just assume and have the time to go read all of the historical context.
But that, we're not asking them to do that.
Let me,
We're just saying, like you said, we'll talk to them, they'll tell us what they've done. The people that we get to do the harm report will look at what they've done, and then we'll bring that information back and be able to make recommendations. And if you want to put that inside the description of the committee, we have leeway to do that. So we don't have to make it complicated for no reason.
I think as a practical matter, what Nick expresses and what I think makes sense is that you have to go into these meetings not assuming harm. You have to go in to figure out what's going on. And when you begin with the label harm, you set up a practical roadblock to getting the information you want to get. And so that's why I say, because you have to leave the door open, that you come out of the meeting saying, this particular department did no harm. But if you start by saying, I'm developing a harm report, you see what I'm saying? It's just, as a practical matter, if I were investigating something, I would have to have an open enough mind to say, I'm going in here to get the facts. And then I'll figure out where they go from there. But I'm not going in saying I'm developing a harm report.
If you've done no harm, then there's nothing for it.
Right.
That's why we're here. Exactly. We're here. This is a reparations commission. So even if the reparation commission comes to ask you what you're doing, you're gonna assume that we're coming to talk to you about
The harm.
the harm you've done to the community. That's why.
I think we're jumping a little ahead, and all I'm saying is, we're dealing with departments that have human beings. And some of these people are just doing their job. They just graduated, they got a degree, they don't know anything about what we're getting ready to approach them with. And we're slamming doors that we don't need to slam. We're creating barriers that don't need to be there. All we're really doing is evaluating the department. That's and I don't know why this is so difficult to grasp. That's
If you
why I
want to
tried to
the
say.
Evaluation committee, go ahead. It's just a function of what the committee is going to do.
I think we're focusing on stuff that we don't really need to be focusing on. The bottom line of it is it's a starting point for redress. So if it's a starting point for redress, I think this can be discussed in that committee.
Right.
But it impacts, I want to say that it impacts, I'm sorry, Jamila, what are you doing?
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quick, I second at least what you're saying about, Commissioner McCoy regarding the terminology. I think you can maybe have like a bullet underneath that a harm report can be developed through this committee. But there is other work that I think is going to happen that is related to the harm report, but it might not necessarily be the harm report or the work that's going towards the harm report that I think does still fall in line with what I'm understanding that this committee is supposed to be. And so I think that I think is the terminology that's the issue here. And I understand, like, that's the term for the particular process that is like being talked about. However, I think that that's just like one bullet in other work that might happen in that committee.
And that's basically what I was gonna say, what comes to mind from what I'm hearing, let's say, is that it evaluation, just looking to see, again, there may be harm there, but there may be departments in government have the oddest names and you're not sure what it is they actually do, and you get in there and you're like, I would never would have known. So what's an ombudsman, right? So you might come across a department that is able to provide a opportunity to do funding and to execute a program or to exercise a strategy that is going to be beneficial for something that we want to accomplish. And we wouldn't know that if we go in specifically looking for harm. So it's not like, okay, they're good, and then you walk away. That's not all, to Jamil's point, that's not all that they're doing necessarily. And Nick mentioned that, the banquet book.
Our charge is to make short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations on how to build the racial wealth gap in the city of St. Paul and build generational wealth in Black America.
Right.
So when we're coming to talk to them, and we're gonna say these people from the Reparations Commission, the St. Paul Recovery Act Community Reparations Commission, want to talk to us about what we do. So basically, if you're reparation, and the word reparation is coming from the word repair. And if you're talking about repair, that means something has been harmed, or a group of people have been harmed. And that's why we're here. So I don't know, if you guys want to call it something else, that's fine, but it's still going to serve the same function. We're still gonna have to produce a harm report. So I mean, if we can call it an evaluation committee or. But
I don't want to go too far with this, but I'm resonating that this is a semantic, what I would call a semantic thing.
Exactly.
So here's what you do. It's an assault rifle. But if you call it a modern sporting rifle, all of a sudden you've opened doors that you could never open when you called it an assault rifle. And I'm not promoting assault rifles, I'm just giving you an example. Call it a modern sporting rifle, whatever you need to do.
Well, right now, we have, how many people do we have that are part of that commission? Or committee?
Kuya, Joseph, Carla, and Jeremy.
So I would like that commission to decide what they want in their charge and
You
what they
can
want
put me
to
on that commission, but I will say,
and what they want to call themselves and things.
these are not semantics. These are basic tools that people use in government. So we have to remember where we're going and what we're doing. Everything is not going to be a historical lesson for people. Sometimes we just need to come in with our body of knowledge and expertise in our own historical context to help them get it. That's what we're going to be doing. We're working in a government agency. So we need to make sure that when we come in, we create clear-cut levels of understanding that don't require a lot of historical grounding for these departments to understand what we're looking for.
Well, so so we're gonna add Nick to that commission.
Yeah. Can I just have one comment? I think that's a great idea to have the committee decide the scope of its work and report back to this body. I also just want to say, one of the things that the city did in passing the ordinance was to acknowledge harm. And so I don't want to reinvent the wheel in terms of the thing we spend our energy on. The city acknowledged the harm, and that's why the commission exists, to do policy recommendations on how to repair it. And so there's some merit, I think, and I hope this committee will hash this out in taking the position that we actually don't have to go down that road again. All we really have to do is develop policy recommendations that repair the harm. And,
But if you don't know what the harm is, how can you repair it if you don't know what the committee does?
and that's why I say, let the committee
That's what we're
decide,
doing.
let the committee decide the
Our
scope
work is to
of
go
that.
in and
that work.
literally establish whether or not there is harm being produced by that department. That department's not gonna know. Harm is just one of the things we might find. We also might find proficiency. But we're not calling it the proficiency committee. It's just evaluation.
Whatever the
And we're
committee
not-
calls itself would say that this is a great body of government that has really helped Black people throughout its existence. And that's what we would say, I don't.
Well, that's not the goal, though. The goal is to make policy recommendations on repair.
Right,
That's
so that's what I'm, if they haven't harmed us, then why would we make recommendations?
Well, they might, but
But can we,
Now, this is semantics.
right, and that's what I'm saying, we have the people that wanna be on the committee, and then we can have that, let them have that discussion. Then that takes place.
Agreed.
So, I think those are all, pretty much all of them.
Mhm.
And then our next topic is adoption of the Bible.
I move we adopt the bylaws.
Our next order of business is adoption of the Bible. Did everyone get a chance to review,
I say let bylaws be my.
did everyone have a chance to review the Bible?
I said bylaws, they're bylaws.
So, is there a motion on the floor to be,
I move the adoption of the bylaws.
I second that motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
A clear one.
Okay, and our next order of business is to reflect on the next meeting. Are there any suggestions for what you would like to see at the next or future meeting agendas? And we'll be meeting that round of,
It would be cool if we could talk to the procurement people, since they mentioned that, when we were talking about the finance piece, because, as you had mentioned earlier, Commissioner, I'm gonna correct your last name. Yeah.
Golden.
Golden, okay. As Commissioner Golden mentioned earlier, like, I do think that there are spaces for us to also review and kind of look at how we could potentially have recommendations in that area.
Just wanted to know, like, who's gonna follow up as far as setting time for the committees to meet and like that process.
right now.
Okay.
So they are supposed to, I mean, the intent is that they meet outside of this already meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's
can meet wherever you want.
the subcommittee, and those meetings can be on Zoom or Teams.
Right, and I do believe that those don't even have to be public, if I'm not mistaken, they don't.
They don't have a point.
No,
No.
we can't have more than.
All right, let me check on that though.
You introduce
I have to have a point.
Right there, with that,
Not necessarily, but let me
not
check.
for a subcommittee. But we.
All right, I was hearing some difference, so I'll need to check.
Are there any other business items? And
Do we get minutes?
Oh.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, do we get minutes?
Thank you for asking that. Yes,
Okay.
Jamie and I are working through minutes. Jamie just got on board, so she's kind of helping me kind of clean up the minutes and get a uniform look. I still have to review, because I think we've had her and another person do minutes, so, I have to kind of sort through different formats and, kind of come to a singular format or something and
And one more
listen to tapes and make sure that they're right. So I'm hoping by the next meeting, it will be a clump, but then after that, we can start approving each month's minutes.
No, I'm just, but the minutes are based on the recording, right?
Correct.
Is the recording, accessible?
The recording is on our website.
Yeah, so
So,
you can basically stream it.
Yeah,
Cool. That's all. I just wanted, I thought that was true. I just wanted to,
yeah, you can view it on the website.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by streaming, but you can view it.
you can see it.
Before we adjourn, Jamie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Janie Vang. I am work with Veronica. I am a office assistant and I also do red staff. So I do 2 jobs in one.
Thank you. Seeing no other business before us, is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Discussion.
We got a question over here.
And now the meeting's adjourned. I know the audience is